Yeah, thanks for sticking with me, and we'll jump in now. So, welcome to downtown ReactJS Meetup, Austin, Texas. I'm Aiden Garza, and today we're going to be talking about analytics with segment. So, what we'll talk about overall is why should we care about analytics, and then what is segment, what are the main parts of it, and how do we use it in a React app. So I kind of want to just talk about this briefly. So why should we care as software engineers about analytics? And I'll say, like, first off, our software has a purpose. Like, there's a reason that we're going to work and writing code. Like, we're trying to accomplish things, and each of our companies and each of our projects has a unique purpose. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing it, investing our time in it or getting paid to invest our time in it, or, whatever the economics look like. We're doing it for a reason. So, why would we build something for a reason and then not make sure that it is fulfilling its purpose? Why we when we build something, we need to make sure that it's doing what we set out to do initially. And ultimately, it's all about our end user. So, like, if we're just turning out features one after the other and we don't care if they actually work or if they are solving the problems that we set out to solve, or fulfilling the purposes we set out to fulfill, having too many features is just as bad as having too few, because complexity is expensive. Now you have more code to maintain. Your users have more things to keep in their heads. Uh, we don't want stale things, and we don't want a bunch of things that don't work cluttering up our user experience. And that goes for all parts of software, front end, back end. We all have end users, and this applies across the board. And even then, like, even if you do make sure that a feature works when you initially build it, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to keep fulfilling the purpose over time. People's usage changes, people's needs change, and yeah, it's a constant cycle. We're constantly evaluating our work and our products and our code, and making sure that it's continuing to fulfill its purpose. And most of the time, we see this represented by this build, measure, learn cycle. So, you build something, you measure its success, you learn from the measurements, and then you either continue building it or build something new. It's all, depends on your product life cycle. But it's really important that we know that our software is doing the job that it's intended to do. And so we need tools that can help us to measure that success. So I have a video here, but in my testing, it didn't actually show. It let me share my audio, but let me try here. Okay, share tab audio.
How segment works. You add segment to your application, which starts collecting data. You can add segment to your website, mobile apps and servers, or cloud app, like your email marketing tool, help desk, or payment system. When a customer interacts with one of your sources, segment captures it and sends it to your destination. Destinations, which are tools for things like advertising, email marketing, push notifications, analytics, and webhooks, ingest that customer data and then let you take action on it in the destination. Segment also sends that customer data to your data warehouse. Within Segment, you can also identify what personal user information you're collecting, where you're collecting it from, and where you're sending it. Then set rules to automatically protect that user data. If you have protocols, you can clean your data inside Segment. If you collect an event that you didn't expect to see, or which doesn't match what you're expecting, You can either reject that event or keep it for further inspection. If you have personas, you can tie all those events into a single profile of the person who created them, so that the profile represents every action they took with your applications. With that data, you can infer traits and audiences that person falls into, then send that to your destinations. In the next lesson, we will show you
All right. So that segment at a very high level, and
what you can do with segments.
there we go. No, there we go. Okay, so I hope you guys could hear the video. It worked for me a bit earlier, but it's kind of hit or miss. Um, but you saw some code snippets, some concepts in there like sources and destinations, and a lot of what they talked about is focused on like customer data and email marketing and and things of that nature. But as developers, and we might care about those things. We definitely care about those things as part of a company when we're writing our software. But uh, kind of what I'm talking about in this particular video is how the things that we care about tracking, kind of the analytics, like how people are using our application and how how often that they're using features, or how they're using features, or the order that they're doing things, and all of that can help us to improve the user experience. So there were some code snippets kind of throughout the video, but really, as far as in a React app client-side application is concerned, there are um, five different message types that you can track. So the first one is identify, and so that's identifying the current user in their session. So it's just analytics.identify. It has two arguments, where the first one is their user ID of some kind, and then the second one is whatever an object with whatever information you want to include. So say like email address, name, if they're part of any like user groups or anything along those lines. And there's the track call. So this is the one that we use most often. And this is actually tracking individual events. So you can give them, unique names like added item to cart, and then have any uh, supporting information. Like here we've got an item ID and a particular sales price in cents or something along those lines. And this is the call that we make most often to to actually track the events that we care about. And next up is a page method, which lets you track like a customer's page view. And I should include, like, after you have identified a user, their information, every one of these other calls, track, page, whatever it is, gets attached to that, or that user's information gets attached to all of these. So you don't have to do all of that over again. Like after you've done the identify call once, you already have all of these other calls attached to that user. So the page views are in a React app using, like a single page app. It'd be like on history changes, or anytime, uh, the location path name or the URL changes in the history. And then a group is a way of like putting your customers into, or your users into particular groups. So you could have somebody that happens to be a subscriber and they belong to certain categories and they had a specific join date, or um, you know, if it's if it's a e-commerce platform and somebody goes to their cart with items in it and then leaves, you could put them in your own group that's cart abandoners or something like that. So can be really useful just for kind of grouping your users together. You could also do things here like if they belong to an account, like if I have an account with Google but I belong to Homeward, my so I can also say I identify myself as Iden, but my group is Homeward, the company that I work for in this particular app. So there's a bunch of things that you can do with group. And then alias is if the user you've identified has any other uh, identifiers that you want to use. So like for example, a user came from your website to your app and had like a lead ID or something from a tool like HubSpot or something else like that, and or maybe in your own lead management system, you could apply that lead ID as an alias so that all of the events that they had before they signed in or signed up could be captured as well, along with all of the stuff afterwards. So it kind of helps you tie stories together. So those are the 5 different message types, the 5 different functions you can call for using segment to track. So knowing that, like, how would we use all of this in a React app? So first of all, identifying the user, there's a lot of options for this. It totally depends on how you manage users and how you handle your data layer and all of that. So just like a few examples, like if you have a get request for the user data um, in some hook or even just some API logic, you could have a success case of that request that calls your identify method with the user data. Or if you're using Redux or Redux Toolkit or something along those lines, or any other Redux like data layer, anytime you dispatch an action that updates the user data in state, you could call it there. So like that's an example here. We've got this identify user function. It just checks if window.analytics is available, and if it is, then we call this identify with the user, and we've got that in our login. So if login action was successful, we call identify user and then set the user data in our Redux state. So that's a pretty common pattern for folks who use Flux like data layers. And then, even if you have like an on mount type function in a component, if you have like a lead ID or a user ID or something stored in a cookie, or local storage, you could call it, call it one time with that. So there's a bunch of different ways that you could identify your user, and it all depends on how you have structured your data layer and how you actually request the user data. But yeah, we have lots of options here. So the next one is tracking page views. So this is another one that kind of comes with how your app is structured and how you what's makes the most sense for your application. So you could have like individual components like page or view or container components or something along those lines. And you could have a hook like use page view, where you pass in the arguments that you're wanting to track in that page call, and then have it in a use effect with no dependencies so that it only fires on mount, so that you're on mount of your page, you're tracking a view. Or if you wanted it to be handled globally, like in your actual app component at the top level, you could have a use effect that just looks for, with location as a dependency, that just looks for location changes, and then makes the call just based on the information you have available to you, like location path name. So a nice thing about doing it on the individual way is that you can do things like have define groups of pages, or give the page a canonical name, even if the path could be the path could vary wildly. Whereas here, unless you've built some other type of scaffolding to know that metadata around a particular path, then you'll have to, you'll just have to use the data that's included in location. So again, lots of options, and it all depends on how your app is structured. And the one that we do most often is tracking events. So typically what I've seen is and done in the past is have a layer of abstraction here. Like we don't just want to have window.analytics whatever calls all over the place. We want to be able to um, structure our tracking events, maybe add default options or global options. Like maybe there's data that we want to go in every track call. So we leave all those options open to ourselves if we just wrap the window.analytics.track in another function that we control. And so here, as an example, we've got this track function where we're just essentially checking for the existence of window.analytics and then spreading in all of the arguments that this received to the track function. And then here we've got like another layer where we have a use track event hook that maybe can take some default arguments. So like in a particular component, like we have over here, a my button component, and we're going to do use track event hook with every time we call track in this component, and right now it's only in one place, but let's imagine that there were more than one. We want it to also say, oh, the component that is being used in this track is the my button component. And then looks like I should have used track click here in this on click prop, so that's my bad. But yeah, I hope that demonstrates, we can build structure around it so that we can easily do things like add defaults or add, global properties or things like that, and be able to easily change them, or even swap out analytics systems wholesale in the future if we wanted to, without having to go back and retouch everything. So that is the tracking events method. So what I want to do now is dive into like an actual demo. While I get that set up, does anybody have any questions about anything I've talked about so far that maybe I can go into more explicitly when I'm in the demo? Very happy to answer questions. And if not, I will keep rolling. So let's dive in here. I'm going to share my whole screen now so that we can look at a few different things. So here is segment. So I'm signed in right now with my to-do domain model source. And like it said, there's these concepts of like sources and destinations, where sources are the places where we're sending information from, and it can be client side or server side, or even third-party systems. And then destinations can be quite a few things. Like they've got a lot of things you can plug into. But what I would like to start with, so right now we've just got this to-do domain model that I've used as an example in quite a few presentations now, and we don't have it hooked up to any destinations. All we're really doing is sending events to it and seeing what happens. So here's the just to start out. So like the last thing that happened was an undo completed item event at 11:57 a.m. So if I come back into here and let's add an item. So pants, shirts, socks, underwear. What else do we need? Toothbrush for packing. So there we go. We've added toothbrush. And now if I come back and look at segment, we've got an added item event that's been tracked. And that's really cool. I can click into this and see everything that was sent. So, here's the whole item that we just created, and it's not complete and has such and such an ID and no labels, and super useful information if we were to look back after, say a month of users using this and seeing, oh, looks like people tend to complete and then immediately uncomplete all the time. Maybe we should add a confirmation or something like that. So there's so there's all kinds of things that we could do with this, and it all depends on our particular application. But real quick, let's go look at the code that's driving this. File presentation mode. There we go. Please. There we go. Okay, cool. So I'll start with, let's just start with our index.html and just look at what we're doing here. So segment's pretty easy to do. It's just a script tag. And on this particular application, we don't have any routing. It's only one route. And we also don't have any users. This is just a very simple demo that I made that doesn't support a whole lot of things. So we don't have a identify call, and there's just a single page call here. But if you have a single page app with multiple with routing, you could remove this part and call it kind of like we talked about earlier in the presentation. But yeah, so here's the snippet. It's pretty straightforward. Just paste it in the head of your index.html so that you make sure that it loads before anything else does and you don't miss any tracking calls. But let's go down here and look at features. So let's see, we'll start with lists. So lists are these there we go. These top level things here, these lists of these new to-do lists that we can create. So I can add a new one here. So groceries, packing list, party supplies, party supplies. There we go. So now we've got a new list called party supplies and added list. Super nice. But that added list that we just saw right here happened because here in our Redux toolkit slice for lists, so essentially our reducer for lists in Redux, we have this add action. And in that add action, so this would only be called if we just successfully added a list, right? So we're only actually adding the new list data to Redux if it was successful. So here in our add lists action, we're calling track added list, and then with the list that we just got back is the payload. So that's why we see here added list with the ID and the name party supplies, which is what we just did. And there's also one for removed list in the remove action. So if I go here and click that X, removed list now, and there's party supplies again. And then also updated. So here would be like, let's rename packing list to, I don't know, suitcase list, because we feel like it. And now we've got an updated list, and we see that we've got the same, well, I haven't done anything with that one yet, but so it's ID and now its name is suitcase list. So really, really neat how instant it is and how incredibly easy it will, like, drop the snippet in, add these track calls, and you immediately are in business and looking at how people are interacting with your application. So like, I guess I haven't said it yet, but I'm not affiliated with Twilio or Segment in any way. I've just been using it for about 5 years now in all of my applications, and their developer experience is just so seamless, and there's so much you can do with it. I had to talk about it. So just get that out there that I am not affiliated with them at all. I just like it and want to share it. But yeah, so now that we've seen like how this is working, like where we've placed these track calls and like how the interaction is like translating into these events here in segment. Let's take a look at my track. And this is very simple, kind of what I showed in the presentation. Like, this is about as simple as you can get. We've got just a track function that checks for the existence of windowed analytics, and if it's there, we make the exact same call with those arguments. Very straightforward. And the only reason that I did this, if window.analytics, is because typically you might want to turn this off and not actually initialize. You could, I guess that's something I didn't talk about when we were talking about index.html. You can remove this analytics.load and only from your HTML file, and only call that based on your environment. Or you could even do it in here if you really want to with an inline environment variable or something like that, so that it only, you don't want to be actually sending analytics calls most of the time in development, like from your local server. So there's also things that you can do around that, like, it's only enabled in production, and it can be enabled in staging, and it can be enabled locally, or whatever works for you and your company and or your project. But yeah, definitely wanted to call that out. So there we go. We've got our track call that was very simple. We added a list, we removed a list, and updated a list. So now what happens when we need something that's a little bit more complex? So in this case, like our items, we can do a lot of things with our items. We can do the same things as we did with lists, so like add, remove. But then update is kind of complicated, because we can do things like rename and add labels and check it and uncheck it. So there are quite a few things that we can do with items that are unique features. Like labels is a unique feature, something that we want to be able to track independently, so that we know that whether or not people are actually using the feature that we built, and whether it's solving its purpose. So let's take a look at the item slice. So here we've got another add action, where again we've got added item with the item, and then a remove action, removed item with the item. And then, but update, we got a little more complicated. So I start by grabbing the current version of the item in state. And then we're going to check, is the name different than, say, updated item name? So let's see if that works. So pants, going to England. That's probably not how you spell it. I don't know how to spell trousers, apparently. But so we've changed it to trousers. And if I go look here, updated item name, and we've got the new name here. Or if we want to add a label, none of these really apply, but let's trousers pantry. That's funny. Let's go with that. So updated item labels, and now it has the label pantry. Or there was also, what else do we have here? Okay, if the new one is complete, but the existing one is not complete, then we just completed it. So completed item would be what it is. And if we go look here, completed item, and now complete is true. Very cool. And then finally, undo completed item. So I guess occasionally people uncheck, and that was something that we built that we wanted to know if people were using it or when they were using it. So if we do that, there we go, undo completed item. So there we go. In a very short amount of time, we can now look into everything that's done in this particular little tiny application that we care about, and how our users are using it. And at the moment, all we're doing is looking, but we can't analyze the data if we don't have the data. So again, an even better way to do it would to actually know what you want to measure in the first place, right? So like when you're building a new feature, the best thing to do is to have measures of success for that feature. As part of your designing that feature, you should also design how you measure its success. And then what that allows you to do is let you build in the appropriate analytics so that you can track that success. And not enough teams do this in my experience. And it's really, really important. Going back to the things that we talked about here in the beginning. Why would we build something without making sure that it's fulfilling its purpose? And why would we keep adding and adding and adding features that may or may not be relevant, or when usage changes over time and ultimately affecting our user experience? So yeah, that is all that I have to say. I guess real quick before we get into questions, I would like to call out that Homeward, this year raised $371 million Series B, and we are going to be hiring here. Looking for all levels of software engineers, front end and back end, and data engineers. And if you are interested in chatting with me, please email me at iden@homeward.com. I would absolutely love to hear from you if you're looking for a new role, or hell, even if you just want to chat about this presentation or anything development related, I am available. And yeah, definitely want to open it up for some questions. Know that there's a bit of a lag, so can wait a little bit. But yeah, I mean, seriously, I know that this is a teeny, teeny, tiny application, but it took me literally 10 minutes to add these tracking events to this application. So definitely makes it super easy to get up and running. And then again, where are we? Oh, I guess it's here. Once we have all of these, it starts building a schema for you of your events and can tell you like how many times they've happened. And this is kind of all asynchronous. So this wouldn't be everything. This isn't showing everything that we're currently seeing in debugger, because they have kind of an eventually consistent model going on here. But yeah, if we come and look, we can see all of the different events that we've ever called, and how often they're called, and the different values that we're sending along with them. It is super helpful. And then you can start looking at, from there, based on your destinations, you can take retroactively, you can take all of this information and put it into something like BigQuery or Redshift, and be able to build dashboards from it, or send it into Google Analytics and be able to have your marketing team set things as goals, so that they know that that marketing copy and experiments are working. So I'm not seeing any questions coming through. At the same time, I know that this is quite a few people are probably watching this out of sync, but thank you all so much for spending this evening listening to me. I really appreciate it. And again, if anybody has any questions after the fact, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or to email me, and I'm happy to answer your questions. I hope that everybody has a fantastic week going into the holidays, and a happy holidays and a wonderful new year, and we'll be back again in January. So thank you all so much, and have a great evening.